Leadership is a wonderfully complex topic. Leaders are everywhere and they have an impact on people's lives. There are no perfect recipes. Leaders have different styles. Leaders have good things and bad things. I guess that is the reason why there is so much content on the topic. So many books, videos, podcasts. I've personally done more than a few episodes on leadership, especially in the technology world, but I never ever get tired of it because each person I interview has their own unique style. Today, I will interview Josh Sheppard, a seasoned CTO with more than 25 years of experience in the tech industry, with a beautiful style, a love for people, for technical things, and for having everyone on his team grow. We will talk about his take on leadership, what values matter, why, the fine balance between how much responsibility we can take on as individuals and our well being, and much more. Josh, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mateo. Happy to be here.
Very good. So, we're going to get started with the basics. We're talking about your tech journey. Can you share your journey in technology so far? What were the pivotal moments that you find your path?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've been at this for a while. I came up during the dot-com boom, and as I was studying computer science, I remember being very convinced that web programming was not real programming, that real programming happened on desktops. And then, of course, like I graduate from university and I've worked on nothing but uh, web applications the entire time. I've never worked on a desktop application. Life is interesting, and no matter how convinced we are of something, it finds a way of demonstrating that maybe we still have something to learn, and that's been true for my whole career. Every job I've had has been in a different industry. So when I get asked the question of what industry do you want to work in, it's like, you know, um, I want to do something fun with fun people. To that end, I was a software engineer for quite a while, like I said, in web applications, mostly back end sorts of things. I eventually ended up at an ed tech company called Infinite Campus. I was there for almost 13 years, but my job changed every year. For the first couple of years, it was a tech lead, and then when they grew, I was developer number 12, but eventually they needed more engineering leaders. And so I stepped into that role. And I spent a decade building new teams, transitioning the teams that I cared deeply about off to other people, training other leaders who would become peers, which I found wildly fascinating. Eventually, I was lured to C.H. Robinson, which was Fortune 200, to basically build their machine learning group. I started with four people in my group, along with 10 others who reported in through a different structure. And that eventually became 120 people total, and leading leaders who led leaders, which is a wildly different thing. And deeply enjoyed that. Lots of challenges, big impact, but also it costs something. Before the call, we were referencing even good things have a toll, and we can talk about that as well. After that, I've done some advising with startups, spent some time as a startup CTO for a company called Kindly Human, which is awesome. And that brings us to today.
Amazing, amazing story and amazing story of growth, right? From individual contributor to leader to small teams to huge teams and all in between. Um, in terms of leadership lessons, what have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned as a leader in the tech industry, especially in building and leading teams?
Yeah, so I mentioned I was a software engineer for a while, and at some point I had been an engineering leader longer than I had been a software engineer, and it hurt my heart because I was no longer a software engineer who happens to be a manager. I was now maybe having to admit that I was leading people was what my contribution was. I learned the hard way from one of my team members uh, the lesson that leading your team does not only mean sheltering and supporting your team. Sometimes that is helping them achieve even when you're not in the room, so to speak. And I deeply remember one of my engineers pulling me aside at one point and say, like, I see that you're trying. I see that you care. I see that you're working with this other team that we're struggling with, but you're the messenger that's getting shot. Like, we see that you care and you're trying. But that just means you're the one doing shuttle diplomacy. And that's not helping us solve the problem. It's trying to solve the problem for us. And that was very interesting to me because up until that point in my career, um, solving problems yourself, like especially as an individual contributor, like that's the thing. Um, Especially early in your career. And even as a frontline manager, like the beginning of that, you are recognized for what problems you solve. You know, you get the comments about rolling up your sleeves and getting in to help the team, things like that. And those are praised. But I have learned that while that has its place, it's often not most of the time. And as I've embraced that more, um, my teams have developed faster, grown stronger as a result. And I have gotten more enjoyment out of seeing them succeed, uh, while also getting shot less, metaphorically speaking.
Do you also find that you have more time to focus on specific things, or are you happier? Describe more the feeling of where you realize that, okay, I can push them to solve this for themselves, and it's going to make me anxious, and I'm going to be looking and maybe biting my nails. But when I realize that they can do it, it's like liberating. Explain more the feeling.
Yeah, yeah. So building on what you were saying, like that idea of um, watching the little bird fly, so to speak, right? Like it's a leap of faith, and I hope this works. But I think that's part of what a leader should be doing is creating that safe space to fail, uh, and giving the team or the individual every opportunity to not fail,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
it should be safe if it doesn't work out, but the goal for you and them is for it to be awesome. So how do you set that up and then get out of the way? Uh, I I have grown to understand that um, I like seeing things built more than I like being the person that built them. That the end result is what's interesting to me. The journey that the people go through to get to that place is interesting to me. Um, but actually being the one hands on keyboard, like I love it. It's just not the thing I love most. Um, uh, so there's a lot around that. Feel free to poke more. But that's kind of my initial thoughts there.
I love it. I just one more follow-up question, and we'll move on to a deeper topic. But um, so you said something that is very important. Failing in a safe environment, right? What I want
Mhm.
to ask you is, at the same time, you're pushing them to fly, right? So it can feel scary. Is there a place for safety and safe and scary at the same time? Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's um so safety is an interesting word. It means a lot of things. Often psychological safety. is the most important. But that takes for granted physical safety, and some places in the world that should not be taken for granted. Where I live, that's um, more more likely, but being sensitive to folks that are working in different locations, that's important. But speaking about psychological safety, there's the we need to live in that place where we're being challenged enough,
Mm.
but not too much. So to that end of like, how do you help your individual team members or your team understand where they're at right now and what awesome next looks like? And then like, do they have a plan for how they're going to get there? If not, can you help them come up with that plan?
Yeah.
Give them some pointers, but it needs to be their plan. Then, you know, have them follow through on it, but be there. Be kind rather than nice after the fact. Let them know, like, hey, how did that go? How did you feel when X happened? Do you think you might want to do that differently? What would that look like? Here's what I saw. Is that what you wanted me to see?
Right.
You know, um,
Right.
that critique and actionable feedback in a timely fashion is incredibly important. I personally deeply enjoy getting feedback. I don't always love what I'm hearing, but I know that I need to hear it.
Right.
Being ignorant is not going to help me. Uh, but that safe space, I think, is really that thing. Like, it's not every single thing that they do needs to be successful. It needs to be in aggregate awesome.
Yeah.
And it will be more awesome if they learn. And that's the other side is, the team ships this one feature, great. But that's not the goal of an employee. That may be a contractor. But most folks, like as a people leader, it's reliably being awesome.
Yeah.
And that means that you may have, some that are rebuilding years, so to speak, um a deliverable. They need to be better than they were, and that's the objective, or they need to learn a new technology, or they need to try another way of working together. So I think that's part of it, and kind of challenging them. I like the idea of retrospectives, um, but between sprints or iterations, um, whatever verbiage someone wants to use, but that idea of what do we want to try next to improve?
Got it.
And then reflecting on that. Did we try or did we forget? And then how did it go? And do we want to keep doing more of that or do we want to chase something else next? I so that kind of just pushing the edge, but not every time will you get progress.
Got it.
That feels like the
Right
right thing.
balance. We have to look for the right balance.
Mm,
Now you emphasize perseverance and integrity as core values.
mm.
Why are these so important to you, and how do they shape your leadership style?
Sure. So I'll tackle integrity first because I feel like that's part of how I like to participate as a leader. To me, there will be hard conversations. Sometimes somebody didn't get a promotion that they think they should get. Sometimes they don't get a raise that is what they would have wanted, and maybe the budget's just not there, even though they've done awesome. And so what is possible and what is appropriate may not feel the same. And how do you help somebody through that? Um, but when you are providing that critique, like we talked about earlier, or when you are breaking some bad news, that's not an attack on them, but may feel very disappointing. If you've built up that sense of trust. You know, when you tell them something is true, it's because it is. That you will tell them when things are awesome, and you will tell them when things could be better, or need to be better, and make a distinction between those two, without surprising anybody. Then those harder times are easier to cope with. Um, but that's like you're investing in that relationship, you're investing in that trust, and you have to be very consistently um, acting with integrity in order to pull that off. Otherwise, like things are going great when they're going great, and when they're going bad, like it's just firefighting. Um, because everybody's unsure of who's going to get deeply in trouble about a thing, as opposed to um, we're in this together. We will continue to be in this together. A bad sprint happens, a bad release happens, and we're going to do another one. And it might go wrong too, but we'll still be here and we'll still make progress. So, how do we build systems around ourselves so that when we make a mistake, we're protected? And so sometimes that's things like automated tests, sometimes that's peer reviews, like there canary releases. There's all sorts of techniques, but the idea is what's that safety net? We will make mistakes. So how do we make sure that we know quickly, we can respond quickly, and we can learn and try again? Because this is not the last time we're going to do whatever it is. This is kind of what we do every day, all the time. So that's like the integrity side. That's to me very interpersonal. That's the how I try to relate with others and how I'd like to be perceived. Um, on the perseverance side, uh, to me, this is more about um, what I find rewarding. Um, I have found that there are a number of things that need to be done or should be done that don't get done because people see them as impossible. And often impossible um, is what it's perceived as. In reality, it's difficult. It requires keeping at it. Uh, but it's worth it. Like this is an outcome that has value, and whether I succeed today, this week, even this month, that's okay. That it's not going to happen. You don't have that immediate gratification like, committing code. Um, but the outcome is really important. When I was at Infinite Campus, there was a time where our source control system, we were using Subversion at the time, which is centralized, and it was dying every day. And it would make developers lose chunks of time. It would very much interrupt their day. Commits would go slowly or fail. It was not reliable, and we got to a place where we were rebooting that central system nightly so that it would be more likely to not fail the next day. And anytime you run into something like that where you've got this band-aid that you're applying constantly, like that's a smell. That's a thing that needs to be changed. But changing it means change to what? Where's that effort going to come from? And in the case that we were in, there were like 45 engineers who had hard deadlines that they could not miss. So how do you not disrupt the release cycle? How do you not, you know, break the build process, which is based on the source control system and stuff like that? And so that was a thing where we chipped away at. And I'm like, as an engineer, it was like, okay, what are the technical hurdles? Because my boss is a technologist and I need to make sure that they're on board technically. And then there's the how, the people side that we needed to address. But the technical side, okay, what's the next hurdle? What stops us from being able to do this today? We'll knock that one down. We'll knock that one down. We'll demonstrate to ourselves and to others that this is going to work in small chunks. But we had to do this for months. And then at some point, I looked at folks and was like, is there any reason why we wouldn't just do this right now. And everybody was quiet. I said, okay, great. I'm gonna go to the boss's office and tell him we're ready. If you want to come with, you can. And like just rip the band-aid off. Let's go. And then it became about working with people and what's our safety net? What, we're gonna try it. If it doesn't work out, what do we do to roll back? Because the people who were caring about release quality or things like that, or release speed, needed to have guarantees that whether it worked or not, they were not at risk. And so that safety for others who are dependent on you behaving needed to be there as well. So to me, that was one of those things where to this day, like when I talk to folks from that group, they threw a party for me afterwards. And I was like, really? Like, but we got a piñata and it was sort of like an Office Space, like smash the thing that's been driving us nuts. But like they were so unhappy with the source control system and so glad to just have that pain removed, um, that it changed their day every day. But it took, there was nothing super special about it except for we were persistent. Um, and so that's a place where that impact on others was great. And so for me, I want to work on hard things. I want to work on the important things that aren't getting the attention that they need to. Um, if they're already getting attention, somebody's on it. Like it's fine. I don't need to be the one that does everything, but I want to have an impact. And so that's an example where it's not a particularly glorious thing, but it really mattered to everyone in the development group. Um, but nobody thought it could be done until we did it. So I take a lot of pride in that.
I love it. There's we're getting into now a little bit of the next topic in terms of doing the hard things, tackling the impossible, right? You do have a tendency to go for the hard challenges, right? But I want to ask you this. How, many leaders do struggle with how much responsibility they take on personally. So how do you find the right balance between being accountable, tackling those very difficult things, and avoiding burnout?
Um, it is more challenging than I thought it was. When I was at Infinite Campus, um, for me, there were definitely times where I was stressed out. There were definitely times where I felt that there were challenges, but I never hit a problem that was too big. Um, for example, like the moving the source control. We had, I don't know, 45 developers, 10 teams. We didn't miss a release, and we got everybody converted over to a much more complex to use source control system. A lot had to happen to make that work, but the way I would have done it 5 years earlier is I would have worked on the build tools. I would have written the scripts to help move things forward. Instead, I knew that my time was too fractured to do that well. So I recruited some engineers, one working on the build side of things and one working on the developer side of things, to come up with tools to help do that. And I provided them moral support, air cover, encouragement, specific chunks that we can go after so they can perceive progress. But I know that it's just paving the path to where we need to go long term. And then I can tell their story. I can see how successful they are at doing this thing. We can make this work, because then it's not about me. It's about us. We got something done. When I realized as a frontline manager that um, it was more important that things could be done without me than to have things being done by me, or with my direct supervision, that was huge. That was a big unlock. And part of that, like I attribute, like Scott Hanselman has a post where he talks about um, the how do you have a bigger impact? And so when he references that when he gets a question, he doesn't answer it just to the one person who asked the question. He writes a blog post. And that's his way of magnifying the impact of answering one question. Now, many people can get an answer. Maybe even yourself a couple years later when you're like, how did I solve that problem? I don't remember. Well, you can Google like, oh wow, that's the thing that I did and it helped that other person. So getting the habit of you're you're not fixing individual problems. Your job is now to create systems that solve problems. Sometimes that's composed of humans, sometimes that's composed of words, sometimes that's a vision, um, things like that. So when it goes well, that's I think what it looks like. It hasn't always gone well, and I have burned out. I've gotten better, but uh, later in my career, I did take on some things that were too much for me to tackle the way I was tackling them.
I love it. And we keep going back. Let me know if you agree. It seems we keep going back to the concept of delegation and the impact of delegation and the happiness that delegation brings to us. And when you talk about systems, we could say that in a way you are delegating either to people, to algorithms, to solutions that you find, right? But it's still pushing the solution out, um, so that it's there by other persons, by systems, by am I making sense right now? Is that
Yeah, yeah. So, let me equate it to something else. Like when I'm coaching individuals, coaching engineers, kind of growing into a more senior role, one of the common things that I talk to them about is similar to what I've been describing in my own learnings as in more of a leader role, is that I firmly believe that as an engineer, you're, level one, level two, you're learning to be a professional and you're learning to be good at the profession. You start getting into more of a senior, or looking towards like a staff engineer. Your impact must be more than your code.
right?
And the way that that's going to happen is you need to help your ones and twos get better and get more awesome. That is the lever that you have. You have experience, you have guidance. You can be the safety net for them to stretch and try out something new. Because if they're more successful, you as a group are more successful. Your focus is now the success of your team. That when that moves from staff to like a principal, now it's how does your group, not just your team, function?
Right.
It's how do we work together while letting every single team still kind of run at their own pace, like, and so that scope needs to be different. Um, so that scope of impact, I think, is the place I like to focus on is no matter how good an individual person is at their work, they will never be as good as many people
Right.
doing well at that work and that raising other people up um, is the big impact. Like a good employer sees the ripple impact
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. I love it. Um, let's talk a little bit about smart in life, in work. What does it mean, right? What does it mean, to you being smart in life, in work, and how does this influence the way that you set and achieve objectives?
So achievable objectives. I love that's where you landed there, and I think that's probably the most important part. Um, I have had a history of chasing things that were too much. Earlier in my career, it still worked. I could put enough energy in, I could get others rallied around, and we would put enough energy in to overcome whatever was in our way. Um, but achievable is important. And up until, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, I achievable was whatever someone told me needed to be done, even if that objectively was unreasonable. Um, a thing I learned partly by burning out is that just because you're asked to do something doesn't mean it is actually doable with the time, the people, the skills, the support that you currently have. You are accountable for doing the best that you can do. It is harmful to yourself and ultimately to your company by confusing what is plausible with what is asked of you. Um, that is one of those pieces that a lot of my gray hair comes from. It is like I value perseverance, and sometimes persevering requires accepting that somebody asked you to do something and that's not what's going to happen. So rather than take that on yourself, um, or potentially even more dangerous, pass that on to your team and ask them to do something unreasonable. Um, I hear you. I hear that this is an important direction we need to go. Here is the next thing that we can do to move that forward. I also would like to talk about that end goal and what we can do to change it to make it more possible. Nobody wants to hear, no, boss, I can't do this. Because they're probably not coming to you with the first thing. There's probably someone leaning on them. That's also unreasonable, but we're asked to do the impossible. Like that's why people put a lot of money into that magic trick. But managing those expectations is the hard way, the lesson that I have learned, and am trying to remember and again keep in mind and share as I advise startups and things like that. Just because someone has an idea doesn't mean you have to take it on as your life or death mission.
Right.
You should still give it a great effort, but a great effort is not a one-time thing. It's not, and then you're done and you retire. Rarely. So don't treat it that way. You still need to be able to do work tomorrow and the next day and the next
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So go home. Have a
It's a
break.
marathon.
Yeah, talk to other people. Like just because you're not writing code does not mean that you're not contributing value, and resting is important too. You will do better. So a little bit of rambling there, but hopefully it was intelligible.
It makes a lot of sense, and it gets us to our next question, which is about managing expectations, right? And you said something
Mm,
about it, realizing when something cannot be done, and avoiding that sort of challenge accepted mentality, right?
mm.
Which you used to have. It seems that you used to be someone
Oh,
that, you love challenges so much that whatever they were bringing on you, you were like, yes, challenge accepted, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and now it doesn't happen that way. Do you have for the audience any tips on like like if you see a challenge coming your way, breathe and think about it for XYZ minutes and then think about it some more later in the day? Or what tips do you have for people to manage expectations for themselves, and even when you place expectations on others?
Yeah. This is something, so one piece is you you can't care about everything equally. Especially if you want to care deeply. Uh, and like I said, for a while, I was able to find a way to brute force that. And then it turns out when you're not working on uh, trivial problems, for your level, That's just not how it goes. You're going to have to make trade-offs. So what are the trade-offs? Do you want to do so-so at 10 things, or do you want to do awesome at three? Uh, and that's part of what I would encourage is thinking about what is the level of quality, what is the level of impact that you want to have? What is the next best thing, to almost like quote Frozen 2, what's the next right thing uh that you can do that well, and then do the next thing, and then the next thing. Now, you sometimes will have to, or often have to, forecast how many things can you get done. uh, be careful about that. I had a friend of mine who, part of their coaching of me earlier in my career was like, Josh, you seem to have a lot of things that you think are important. How about you take a legal pad and you write down all the things that you think are important. Take 10 minutes, just write all the things. And sure enough, like I had a list of like 50 things, and every single one of them I could look at and say, this is super important and it really needs to be done this week or whatever. And then they would say, okay, well, that's not possible. So pick 10. And it broke my world. Yeah, exactly. Like, but that, I can't, like, that's not, and they coached me through the like it, it's not like each of these. You could talk to me about each of these, and they would require more time than even if you spent 24 hours, 7 days a week. Like, it's not going to happen. Um, so what are you going to do? And I would encourage people to choose awesomeness. Like, pick some things, do those awesome. And then, like, what is the expectations for other people? Like, those are the expectations for yourself. When you're talking to someone else, they're going to come to you with maybe a list that's impossible. They do not want to hear that it's impossible. They do not want to hear no. Uh, that's very frustrating for both parties. What I have found to be very helpful to me and to others is focus on what you can do. And, so somebody comes, here's 10 things. Great. On this one thing, here's what I think we can do. And I think we can also do these other two things. And then leave silent and into to your inside. And I don't think we're ever going to get to these other ones. Uh, because often you can just focus on what they're hearing, and what you are saying is yes. And the quiet part is probably no to these other things, but no one benefits from
Yeah,
focusing on the
yeah.
no's. They will figure it out. They're smart too, but it wildly helps. Like, you told them the truth.
Yeah.
You told them something that was possible. You said, yes, I'm excited. We can do this part. Like, uh, and so like that, hopefully that, again, that makes sense. Like, that's,
It does. It does. Is that how you build a winning culture and at the same time avoid burnout? That ability to now understand, um, looking at it, looking at the challenges holistically and saying, okay, maybe we cannot do all of it at once, but we can focus on these things. So it's a positive outcome driven mentality that separates problem into chunks and says, okay, let's focus on what we can control and what we can do right now. Is that
Mhm.
your recipe for a winning culture?
Yeah, positive progress. Right? Like, you want to know that things got better than they were. Um, you will strive for amazing. You will strive for getting to the end of the road. But today, it's important to get further down the road than you were yesterday.
Right.
And some days you're going to get really far, and some days it's just one. Okay, so what's the one? What's the one you can do today while you're not feeling great? You
Right.
know, you missed lunch and so you're a little grumpy, but what's something you can do? Is it write documentation? Is it write some automated tests? Is it have a conversation about requirements? You're like, what can you do when you can't do everything?
Yeah.
Um, I used to earlier in my career, I used to kind of lean a bit heavily on the do what I say, not what I do, from a benevolent intention, where it was like I would encourage other people to act sensibly and do some of the things that I'm talking about. And then I would act inappropriately. I would take
Right.
on everything else that was unreasonable. That was my problem. I have learned and am trying to continue to internalize that one, that's not healthy for you, and two, it's not sending the right signals to the team.
Yeah.
The team will see how you are spending your time, and for them, they can't skip paying attention to what you're paying attention to. And again, a team member of mine uh, called me on the carpet about this privately, directly, kindly, but directly, that, I was, over here doing this thing and I was over here doing this other thing. And these were things that I felt like I could handle. I asked them to worry about other things. And I didn't understand that I was, because I paid attention to something, my boss is paying attention to something. I need to know about that.
Right.
Otherwise, I might get surprised or my boss might ask me something and I won't know the answer. And so now their time is fragmented, but they don't feel like they can tell you, the boss, that that's not okay. And if they say that they got busy because they were looking at this other thing that was not what you asked them to do,
Hmm.
how do they answer? Like, you told me to do this, but then you went and did that. Well, yeah, but I meant what I said. But
Yeah.
yeah, and uh, understanding that part of what you need to do as a leader is model good behavior. And like I've seen that with bring yourself to work, be yourself at work, is great up until you're at the top of the house.
Yeah.
Because at the top of the house, often you will talk about how that is how we should all work. But then the team at the top of the house rarely behaves by those rules. They feel like, they need to dress differently, act differently. I have a mohawk. You can't see it now because I desperately need a haircut. But like if you're a C-level person rolling in, talking to people in suits and you've got a mohawk, regardless of what else is going on, like there's a pressure to
Yeah.
conform with those expectations, even if those expectations are not what you say is important at your company. Everyone else is in shorts, but you need to wear a suit because other people expect you to wear a suit. So which is it?
Yeah.
Is shorts okay or is the suit like?
Yeah.
So how do you harmonize those things? How do you be clear that there is a tension? And when push comes to shove, what is the answer? When you're under pressure, how you act is your culture. What is that? How do you want to handle that? Um, it's hard, but thinking about it and then asking your team to hold you to it, holding yourself to it, holding your peers to it. Um, I think that's one of those big differences between a good team and a great team, whether that team is of executives or leaders or individual contributors or some combination. Um,
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. And
do
I
what you
love
say.
yeah. I
It's
love
not
how you open the room for people to call you out, right? Because you
mm,
mentioned two examples already about team members calling you out on stuff and you appreciating that feedback and you getting better because of that feedback. That to me that's beautiful, right? And so
and when I've talked to some of those folks, they don't remember them as vividly as I do.
right.
They don't remember the impact they had on me, but it was huge. And I think that that's true with a lot of feedback. Not all feedback lands quite so heavy. Um, uh, but that feedback is a gift. That you never know what's the thing that's gonna like, explode their head,
Yeah.
that's going to make a difference. But I think that's important. Like, that's part of being kind to others is helping them understand when they're starting to stray,
Yeah.
uh, gently bringing them back. Um, you're not going to let them just walk off a cliff, like, right?
Yeah.
Please, don't do that to the
I think
people you
so.
say you like.
Very good. We go back to that integrity value that we talked about before. Um, let's talk a little bit about technologies, kind of the elephant in the room, AI and everything. What technologies get you excited today, and how do you see them shaping the future of technology?
So, one of the things that I've been involved with a lot the last decade is data science or machine learning or AI. AI used to just be a marketing term, like it showed up on PowerPoint, but nowhere else. And now it's the term for everything, and I've tried to get over that. But I bring that up because it is the thing that's out there. Everybody's talking about it. There's, should you use it? Should you not use it? For what? Is it safe? Safe for what? Uh, when is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? I think there's a lot of interesting things there. And as someone who likes writing code, but doesn't write code nearly as often as someone who professionally develops software, I've found that there's a value I didn't consider, which is something I've told people before, but I didn't like get through my own head is writing code is not what I've ever paid anyone for. I'm not paying for a typist or a programmer. I am paying for an engineer. And that means thinking and designing and understanding and anticipating, um, building in safety measures, whether that's a circuit breaker or automated tests or whatever, rollbacks. Um, the thinking is the important part. I believe that as these code generation tools, which is what we used to call them, and it's interesting to me that that's not the words that we use anymore. Um, like how important is it for you to write getters and setters? Basically never. Well, we used to have like declare your variables and then hit a button that says create all the accessors and mutators and like go. Like, and that was okay. Asking Copilot to write some methods that do a thing um is not wildly different. The important part is what things need to be done. And then was it done well? It depends. The classic answer. It depends. And the expert human knows the difference. So I think when we move away from the important part is can you speak this special language? Um, Whatever that might be, Python, Java, .NET, whatever. Um, that is important, but it's not the value you bring. That I think is a very interesting. So unlocking more time to be spent on the value and less time on the admittedly fun typing part. you know,
Yeah.
um, I think that's very interesting. Um, but that's different than it's going to take your job. It's different than like the highly repeatable pieces are the parts that are going to go away. We used to talk about, good programmers write code, great programmers Google. Like, the copy, like, what does Stack Overflow say about this? Well, that looks right. And now I'm going to change this thing. How is that different than saying, hey, Copilot, write a method that does the following, and then you make some changes to make it work for your situation? It's the same thing, but it's not a search engine that's doing it for you and a forum where you're crowdsourcing the answer. It's an automation system that crowdsourced the answer. So, um, for right now, I think how do we use that well and not, especially as an employer, how do we not misunderstand what people bring to the table, what we um, measure, what we incent, how we coach? I think there's a lot of classic misunderstandings around, how many commits a day, how much, how many lines of code, and then all the games that, you know, natural problem solvers will try to optimize the system because that's what we pay them to do. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's that old question about, do we focus on the input or the output, right? And
Mhm.
then what comes with that focus on the output and the analytical thinking skills and everything. As you were speaking, I was thinking about schools, colleges, etc. How do we teach people now to live with this these language generators, etc., etc., um, understand what they do, but also think critically about it, right? Not just take a shortcut and use it, but think critically about it and be that kind of quality tester that you mentioned, like, okay, but is this going to really solve my problem, right? And
Mhm.
have that sort of expert analysis on it. I don't have the answer, but it's one question
Mhm.
that's on my mind. It's an
Yeah.
interesting challenge for the education system, I think.
Yeah. I think like briefly there, I think like writing papers, right? Like you're
Mm,
in an English class and you're learning about the 5 paragraph essay,
yeah,
like it's a formula. And some people really get it. It's a formula, plug and chug. I'm going to make 3 points. I'm going to say what the 3 points are in the beginning. I'm going to have a paragraph for each of the points, and then I'm going to say those things again at the end in another paragraph. And like that's it. Like that's the formula. And what they're teaching you is what the structure looks like. Filling in the blanks is either uninteresting or art,
mm,
right? Like, um, if we're teaching people the structure so they can riff inside of that, I think that's good. Like if you think about jazz or whatever, like you learn the scales and then you use them
yeah,
in creative and interesting ways, right? It's the interaction of different skills that becomes really important.
yeah,
Um, I think, a chat GPT solves the blank page problem pretty well.
yeah, yeah,
But then where do you go from there? It's a starting point, it's not an ending point. And I think when we lose sight of that, that's the problem. So we're helping people learn how to think, not memorize.
yeah,
And that was true before, and it's true now. We often forget. Uh, I think that's the easy to say, hard to do part. That is important in education, whether that's in
yeah.
a corporate setting or a traditional school setting.
No, I agree. um Josh, I have a two parts question right now.
Mm.
What drives you today, right? When Sunday evening and you're thinking about the week, what drives you? And then what's next for you?
Yeah, so what drives me? One of the things that my last year at C.H. Robinson taught me was I had spent my career up to that point, most of my career, um, as someone who had a team. I was their supervisor
Mm,
or their supervisor supervisor or their supervisor supervisor supervisor. Like I had HR responsibilities, and that was part of my role and my identity. Like how many people am I effectively supporting was like a naive way to look at things. I
right.
wanted to look at like we got X done. In order to do that, I have to support these humans, these wonderful humans. Um, what I found out through more introspection and previous boss who put in my head like, what if you still did the mentoring, you're still having the conversations with the staff engineers and those who want to be staff engineers. You're talking about where technology is going. The previous question that you were
Mhm.
asking, like where, do we like this? Do we not like this? Why? Like you're still having those coaching conversations, but you're not writing the reviews. You're not the one who is responsible explicitly for the care and feeding. You're talking about the strategy. You're talking about how things fit together. Um, and that could be a legitimate job. As a people leader, it didn't have to be how many humans under management as like, did I do bigger or better than before? It can be about impact, and you can impact an entire organization, maybe even more if you aren't also responsible for the HR.
Right,
You're leading by influence rather than control anyway.
right.
Why not lean into that? Like make it explicit that you are influencing, not controlling. Um, as a part of that, what I found out is I liked one-on-ones because there was almost always something that somebody was frustrated about or excited about, but wasn't sure how to go somewhere next. They weren't sure, like, I'd like to get promoted, but I don't even know what that means. Like, okay, cool, let's talk about that. Like, again, there's 50 things that supposedly you should be able to do at the next level, but you're not going to do all of those today. And it's not a checklist, so you don't have to do them all ever. Um, but what are you going to do next? Like that can get overwhelming, but you can be that guide on the side helping them break it down. What's the next thing? How do we demonstrate that in your next sprint? How do you then share back and celebrate? I did this thing that is embodying the next level. And helping them see those things. Because you have the benefit of perspective that they're in the weeds and you're not.
Right,
That has led me to things like advising startups, as an
right.
example. Like, yeah, you mentioned Sunday evening, and what are you thinking about tomorrow? Like 7 a.m. this morning, I was talking to this wonderful person in London, about what their background is, the startup that they're working with, and they had questions about what does it look like to hire people and interview and things
Right.
like that. And I got to help share some perspective. What's hard, what's easy, how do you learn more? That's that's what fires me up, and that can be in many contexts.
Yeah.
I'm, you know, am talking to someone about some consulting, around like how can we better use the tools that we have? How can we think
Mhm.
critically about which things to support um, teams with? Like, do we need to get a new tool, or do we need to use the tools we have better, or is the tool a red herring? And we're making it more complicated than we need to be, right?
Right.
Like, algebra works pretty well. Like, doesn't even need to be linear regression. Like, um, so there's things like that are probably in my future. I think I enjoy helping people solve problems, and that could be in a CTO role where the people that I'm helping is the C-suite folks solve problems. I think um, a level down from that is probably even better. Like I love helping other people make their ideas better.
Right.
I love finding solutions to problems, um, and defining the problem myself, um, is not as interesting as solving problems or trying to really understand the problems. So, probably some sort of formal or informal technology leadership or, career coaching sorts of things. I think I really, really enjoy those.
I love it. And I can clearly say, see how good you are at. Um, Let's talk a little bit about a final random question to you. Life outside work. What do you do when you're not working?
Uh, lately, I have learned that audiobooks are amazing
Mm,
and addictive. My children have taught me that. I remember, like when I was coming up, it was like people with their headphones and Walkman and like not listening to people because of that. My kids love to have multiple things going on. Their version of that is an audiobook.
right.
Um, I've found, you know, diving into some other story, I like thinking about how people think. And
Correct.
a good author has those characters with motivations, and the motivations interact in interesting ways. What would happen if questions often get answered
Yeah.
in those. I've also been playing video games, sometimes, cooperative games with some friends from high school, actually.
Nice.
Uh, and um, some of them are, just like a lot of these rogue-like games.
Yeah.
Raven's Watch is one that I've been playing a lot lately, where you do the same thing again and again and again, but getting better at doing that thing is important. And, it's not that anything amazing is going to be different when I have beaten this next difficulty. But it seems like a next thing I can do,
Right.
and the,
Right.
the process is fun. Um, there's a mile marker at the end. It tells me that I beat it, but that's not actually what I want. Like I want the striving.
The
And
process.
yeah. So
Beautiful. I love it. What are you reading right now or
um
listening to?
yeah, listening to I reading been working on Brandon Sanderson's uh uh Way of Kings. It's the like
Okay.
beginning of a series my friends have been talking about for a long time, and I
Okay.
ended up getting into that. Part of what my family does around the holidays is give books.
Nice.
And so that was one. Audiobooks, I just finished one series and then picked up this other like very lighthearted, sarcastic um uh one. It's The Villainous is an SS plus adventurer, which is this wild like title, but effectively this person is self-involved, flighty, whatever,
Right.
but somehow is apparently like super skilled but doesn't think about it that way, but also is super entitled. Like the thing that just happened in the book earlier today was like somebody, you know, was asking them to pay a toll on a road, and they said, I want 10 silver. And they were mad because I am a princess. Like, I am surely worth more than 10 silver, which is just like, of course, that's what you thought. Like, not that's too much, you jerk. Um, like, if you're
Yeah.
going to be a professional, like, treat me treat me well, and that's not well. Like, you need to extort me for more. Like,
Certainly
and
entitled.
yeah, and so that like that absurdness and some of the other characters um giving them a hard time for it, but also seeing like how they rationalize the things that are going on, and their like reality filter is wild to experience. So it's very fluff.
Nice.
Um but it's amusing
Yeah.
to explore the personalities and how they
Takes your mind elsewhere, and that's what it's all about.
yeah,
Very
taking a
good.
break is a good thing.
Yes, like we talk about. Uh, Josh, thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation. Lots of amazing advice for the audience, for myself. I hope we can get to do this again sometime in the future.
Yeah, happy to help. And Mateo, thank you for reaching out. It's awesome.